Shalom everyone, and thank you for joining me, studying Parashat Tetzaveh. And what I would like to learn with you today is to try to understand a bit the priests and the nation. Last week's Parsha, we built the tabernacle, the Mishkan, together. And we tried to understand the meaning beyond the building of the tabernacle. What is the reason for the building? What is the goal that we would like to accomplish? And today I would like to focus and to call your attention to the group that was chosen to serve in the tabernacle and in the temple on a daily basis, which are the Cohanim, the priests. And to try to understand the relationship, the idea, the connection between this special group, the Cohanim, the priests, and the nation of Israel. So the Torah says that Hashem commanded Moshe, ואתה אקרב אליך את אהרון אחיך ואת בניו איתו, please go to Aaron and to his children and bring them closer to you, מתוך בני ישראל לכהנו לי. You shall take and look specifically at this verse. Hashem says to Moshe, take Aaron, take his children, מתוך בני ישראל, from within the Jewish people, לכהנו לי. So you shall appoint men as priests to me. So immediately, the first verse talks a little bit about this ambiguity in terms of the Kohanim, of the priests. Part of them is connected to Bnei Israel. They came from Am Israel, they came from the Jewish people. But at the same time, now they are being elevated to Lechahano li, to be priests for me. Aharon, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, V'itamar, all Aaron's 4 children, Bnei Aaron. So who are the Kohanim? Who are the priests? Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, that they will be killed later on, Elazar ve'itamar. And what should you do to them? ועשית בגדי קודש לאהרון אחיך, לכבוד ולתפארת. And you shall make beautiful garments, priestly vestments for Aaron and for his children, לכבוד, for respect, and תפארת, and for glory. ואתה תדבר אל כל חכמי לב, אשר מלהיטיב רוח חוכמה, and you shall speak to all the people who are smart, that I, Hashem, fill them with tremendous wisdom and talent. ועשו את בגדי אהרון, and they shall make Aaron's garments and his children, לקדשו, to sanctify him, לכהנו לי, so they can be priests for me. So we see few things here. A, we see the ambiguity, as I mentioned before, in regards to Aharon and his children's status. Are they part of Am Israel? Are they part of the Jewish people? Or are they becoming now God's representatives? Or maybe they are something that can intertwine both? That's question number one. Or not so much of a question, but something to clarify for us. The second thing is that we see that there is tremendous emphasis on what? On the Bigdei Kodesh, on these holy priestly vestments, which are not only going to be beautiful, colorful, and very pretty, but they also have a goal to sanctify Aharon, and they are being done by the people. So obviously we need to also understand that these garments, those priestly vestments, are there to distinguish Aharon and his children from all among the nation, because no one else can wear these priestly vestments. So we see in a way almost like a push and pull. On one hand, we basically elevate Aharon and his children, we elevate them up. At the same time, we in a way try to hold them down and to tell them, don't forget, you are part of the people of Israel. And this is exactly the point that I would like to investigate with you today. Priests is not a Jewish invention. The idea of Kohanim, of priests, of people who were elevated for religious reasons or for honor, respect, dignity, was a known culture among the ancient cultures. I just picked one example which is very obvious in the Torah itself, in Bereshit, in Genesis. After Joseph created his 5-year program, his economical program, and he set up the taxation of how much every farmer needs to give to the king, it says, וישם אותה יוסף לחוק עד היום הזה על אדמת מצרים לפרעה לחומש. Joseph set in stone that an Egyptian farmer needs to give at least 20% to Pharaoh from his land, which that land basically Pharaoh owned. רק אדמת הכהנים לבדם לא הייתה לפרעה. With one exception. The priests, their land, their territory, their farms were owned by them, not by Pharaoh. And just think about it. We can learn few things from that verse. A, there were Cohanim, there were priests at the time of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Now, what was their goal? My assumption is that they did some kind of holy service to the pagans that they believed in. So they were a separate group, and they deserved economical leniencies and exemptions. So everyone else paid 20%, they did not. Everyone else's land was basically owned and belonged to Pharaoh. The Cohanim, they have their own land, which leads us to another insight to this pasuk, because when we think about our Cohanim, our Jewish priests, we know, and we'll see that in a few minutes, they cannot own any land. So obviously we see that the idea of priesthood existed in ancient cultures, but Judaism put in a way a different spin, a different light on the idea of priesthood. And the first thing that Judaism does is that they don't have land. So before we go to the third source, we need to ask ourselves a very simple question. Why not? Why don't we want to give the priests a proper, dignified, honorable land so they can sustain themselves and to have a place to call home? Basically, when you don't have a territory, you don't have a land, you can't really build a house, you go from here to there, what's the point? And how is that really can fit the idea of they need to be honored, they need to be elevated when they are homeless? So before we address this issue, let me learn with you and share with you this very interesting paragraph from the Babylonian Talmud, from Tractate Yomah, page 8b, which describes the situation during the Second Temple. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda, וכי לשכת פרהדין הייתה, והלא לשכת בלבתי הייתה. What does that mean? The Talmud talks about לשכת פרהדרין. Lishka is an office or a wing of different offices, and they called it Lishkat Parhedrin. Now, what is Parhedrin? We will see in a minute. I'm not translating it yet to Hebrew and not to English. So then the Gemara is asking a very good question, but it's not called, the name is not the wing of the Parhedrin, but rather it's the wing of the Balvati. So the Talmud is giving us an answer. בתחילה היו קוראים אותה לשכת בלבתי. So you are correct. The first name that was given to that wing of offices in the temple, the name was Balevati. However, ומתוך שנותנים עליו ממון לכהונה, ומחליפים אותה כל 12 חודש כפרהדרין הללו, שמחליפים אותם כל 12 חודש, לפיכך היו קוראים אותה לשכת פרהדרין. So what does that mean? So now I will translate. Parhedrin means ministers that are being switched every year. Meaning you appoint someone for a year, and then you remove him, you put someone else. So, the Talmud says that the priests, especially the high priest, they will acquire the merit to be a high priest so they can serve during Yom Kippur. They will buy it with money from the king. And because they were not worthy, they died immediately after Yom Kippur or during Yom Kippur. And they will be exchanged. They will be replaced. And therefore, every year there was a different high priest. And that's why, in a very cynical way, the rabbis changed the name from Lishkat Balvati to Lishkat Parhedrin, to the wing of offices of this high priest that stays there for 1 year. Now, this source that we just read obviously brings so many questions. Rashi, one of the most famous French commentators on the Torah, on the Talmud, says that the name change reflected on a very deep and rooted change. The first name of the wing of where the priests were at the temple was called Balvati. And Rashi says, Leshon Sarim, that's the second line in this source. כך הייתה נקראת לשכת שרים. What does that mean? Meaning ministers, people who stay there for a while. However, the Cohanim, the priests during the second temple, they will give money to be appointed as a high priest. And obviously, because they were not worthy, they died the same year. So what exactly happened here? So until a point in history, a high priest was a high priest. He was worthy. He knew what is expected of him. He did it. Later on, in the Second Temple, when the Hasmoneans who took over became corrupt, and the Romans also became involved, the high priest would buy his position knowing that he's not going to make it. Why would he do that? We just portrayed the high priest and all the other priests as someone who was elevated to be holy, someone that we will not give land to, someone that we try to keep humble. Where did they get the money from? What exactly happened here? So I will keep this as a mystery for now, and I would like to digress and discuss a different issue. We will go back to what exactly happened to the Cohanim. The Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Nedarim, page 35b, brings this very famous debate. Hibayalu. There is a question, there is a debate. Hani kahani. Those priests, those Kohanim. Shluchei didan havu or shluchei dishmaya? Are they our agents, representatives, or they are God? What is the depth of the question? Are the Kohanim part of us? Or they are so elevated they become God's representative and they have nothing to do with us? How should we treat them? How should we view them? Are they part of the Jewish nation, or they are becoming like mini angels? So lemay nafka mina. So obviously the Gemara is interested in the bottom line and says, okay, so what's the ramification? If they are your representatives or God's representatives? And the Talmud gives an answer, lemudara na'a. יאמר דשלוחי דידנה והוא המהני והאסור, ויאמר דשלוחי דשמיא השרי. So the Gemara gives a ramification which is halachically interesting. If someone took a vow not to enjoy something from this person, and this person is a Cohen, is a priest, if he's my agent, so this person cannot get any enjoyment from that priest because he's my shaliach, he's my agent. And if he's a representative of God, he has nothing to do with me. Leave alone the ramification, because this is not the issue of our class, of our shiur today, of our study together. I am more interested in the question itself, less interested in the answer. The question itself reflects much more than just the halachic question. The question is, what is the identity of a Cohen? And I will try to explain myself. A Cohen, a priest, is restricted in many restrictions. And we can even divide them, to some extent, to different categories. There is a category of who he can marry. There are certain women, he cannot marry them. So that's what I will call family, the category of family and marriage. Then there is a category of what we call tum'at met, impurity. We know priests cannot go to the cemetery unless it's one of their 7 immediate relatives: parents, siblings, God forbid, children, wife. But they can go to their friend's funeral. The high priest cannot leave the temple even if his parents died. So the second category is the impurity or purity that is expected from the Cohen. Third restriction: the Cohen cannot own any land, any territory. So it seems to be the three, we restrict them, and at the same time, what are the privileges of the Kohen? So A, he served in the temple. He brings the korbanot, the sacrifices. In addition, we know we give him gifts. In Parashat Korach, later on in the book of Numbers, there are 24 different types of gifts that we give to the priest in order to sustain him, in order to support him. So we created a very interesting mechanism and structure. On one hand, the Kohen is elevated, being supported, being sustained. At the same time, he's restricted and he owns nothing. So that reminds us a bit of another person who was elevated to a position. And also with that position came many restrictions. And who is that person? The king. In the book of Deuteronomy, the Torah delineates all the restrictions and expectations that we have from a king. רק לא ירבה לו סוסים ולא ישיב את העם מצרימה למען הרבות סוס. He should not increase the amount of horses he has. And he shouldn't go back to Egypt in order to bring more horses. והשם אמר לכם לא תוסיפון לשב בדרך הזה עוד. Because Hashem told you, you don't go back to Mitzrayim, you don't go back to Egypt. ולא ירבה לו נשים, he shouldn't have too many women. ולא יסור לבבו, and his heart should not deviate. ורק כסף וזהב לא ירבה לו מאוד. He can accumulate gold and silver, but not too much. והיה כשבתו על כיסא ממלכתו, and when he sit on his throne, וכתב לו את משנה התורה הזאת על ספר מלפני הכהנים הלוויים. He should write another Torah and to put it in his bosom, next to him. והייתה עמו וקרא בו כל ימי חייו. The Torah should escort this king everywhere he goes. למען ילמד ליראה את השם אלוקיו, so he should learn to fear God, לשמור את כל דברי התורה הזאת, to keep, to observe all the commandments, ואת החוקים האלה לעשותם, and to do everything that it says in the Torah that he should do. Why? לבלתי רום לבבו מאחיו. So his heart will not become haughty, that he will not become arrogant. Because if he will, לבלתי סור מן המצווה ימין ושמאל, he should not deviate from the mitzvah, right or left. Why? למען יאריך ימים על ממלכתו, so he will have longevity, הוא ובניו בקרב ישראל. So he and his descendants will be able to what? To be the future kings. This is something incredible. If the Jewish people choose to have a king, this king needs to know that he is only a servant to the people and definitely to God. And this is a point that I would like to really magnify. There are certain concepts, elements, ideas that every culture, every ancient culture had. Priests, kings, leaders. Judaism also had it. Judaism also has it. However, there is a clear distinction. The priests in Egypt were exempt from taxation and they own land. Jewish priests are homeless, are landless. Jewish priests supported themselves. And my assumption is that they also receive donations. The Jewish priests, or priesthood in Judaism, is that they rely on the people to sustain them, which creates dependency between us and them. A. B. When you know that you need to, not to beg for food, but you are dependent on someone else, you cannot be haughty. So take a look at what Judaism did and how sensitive we are. We understand that by elevating you and bringing you into the temple, it can create something which we will be very sorry for, which means we caused you to deviate. Because you have a position, and you feel that you are holy, and you feel that you are holier than thou, and you look down upon the people. This is the last thing we want. We want to elevate you so you can elevate others. King, when you look at ancient culture, if you look at the history of the world, and you see what kings did and how they treat people, and what did they do, it was terrible. Now, I will be honest, when you read Tanakh, and you read Kings A, Kings B, and you read some of the prophets, it was not that good by us either. But in terms of the ideal is, a king needs to understand. You cannot have too much money, too much gold, too many horses, too many wives, because it will cause your heart to deviate. And you are like the symbol of someone who can reach a tremendous position, but at the same time, to keep humble. So in a way, the priests and our questions about, okay, so how do we define them? Is that a separate group? Is that a group from within us? The answer is, all answers are correct. All the above. They are elevated, and we have expectations from them, family, purity, being humble. At the same time, we elevate them to be holy. And they are special. And they have special vestments and special garments and special honor and dignity. And now, it's up to them and us to almost to dance between these two elements and to try to reconcile them. there is a tremendous amount of responsibility on the priests. So they don't create like a group of an elitist group that they have nothing to do with us. And we also should know that we have a lot to do with them and we should learn from them. So in a way, the quote-unquote, the Jewish priesthood began with the verse, and I'm going back now to our first verse, mitoch bnei Israel, the first line, ואתה אקרב אליך את אהרון אחיך ואת בניו איתו, bring them closer, mitoch, from within bnei Israel, from within the people of Israel, לכהנו לי. So they need to know that they are part of the people of Israel, and they are part of me. In this gray area, we can now understand how come that the Talmud in Yoma, the Babylonian Talmud in Yoma, describes to us a tremendous disappointment from the priests. They bought with money, they bought with money their position as high priest, thinking that that will lead them to some kind of greatness, which was a fatal mistake on their part. So what's the purpose of a Kohen? What is his mission? What does he do all year long? So the pasuk in the prophet Malachi, chapter 2, verse 7, says the following: כי שפתי כהן ישמרו דעת ותורה יבקשו מפיהו, כי מלאך השם צבקות הוא. The lips of a Kohen will observe knowledge, and you should seek Torah from his mouth, because he's like angel of God. This is an incredible verse, which basically says that the purpose and the position of a Kohen is to be a teacher, to teach, and to be an example of someone who is a Torah scholar, and that you seek Torah from his mouth, because he's like the angel of God. Says Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, the French commentator that we mentioned before, כי שפתי כהן, the lips of a Kohen, עליהם מותר לשמור דעת למה שהרי תורה יבקשו מפיהו, שכבר דבר זה מסור להם יורו משפטיך ליעקב. Basically, they need to know, the Jewish priests, they need to know that they should observe the knowledge, they should teach the Torah, because Yaakov told Levi, the tribe of Levi, that all the Cohanim are from the tribe of Levi, Yoru mishpatecha leYaakov, they shall be the teachers for the people of Israel. Ki malach Hashem, because they are like the angel of God, shlucho shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu כמלאכי השרת לשרת לפניו ולהיכנס לפנים במחיצתו. Because this priest, who is your teacher, he is also like the angel who goes in and out from God's presence. So take a look at the complexity of the position of a Jewish priest. It's an incredible thing. On one hand, he is a teacher. What is a teacher? A teacher teach everyone. Someone who is very smart, someone who is less smart, someone who is more interested, someone who is less interested. This is a teacher. And a teacher needs to teach in a way that you understand. So he needs to have tremendous savlanut, patience, and with the people, with the students. And at the same time, this Kohen goes to the temple, serves in the temple, brings sacrifices, is in close touch with God, so to speak, and he himself needs to balance between these two quote-unquote personalities, to be a teacher and to be an angel at the same time, which is definitely not easy, not an easy task. It's not easy on them, it's not easy on us, but that's how it works. When they teach you, and think about it, this is brilliant what the Torah is trying to do. You take a group of people, you elevate them immediately When you elevate a group of people, they think that they are the most elitistic group and they are the best. So obviously they become hardy and they become arrogant and they expect that everyone will honor them and everything. What do? We say to them, no, 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 no. We elevated you so you can elevate others. How would you elevate others? Answer, teach them. Be in touch with them. Don't segregate yourself. Don't ghettoize yourself in a little room and only smart, talented, rich people can be with you. No, teach the masses. This is also why would you not going to have land? Because a priest works at the temple for 2 weeks for the year. That's it. What should he do for 48 weeks? Sounds like a real good job, right? 48 weeks vacation. No, there's no vacation. 2 weeks at the temple, 48 weeks going around Am Yisrael, going around the people of Israel, going around the land of Israel, teaching people Torah and being sustained by them. Look how the Torah created a mechanism that keeps checks and balances on the spiritual aspect of their lives. You elevate someone, and at the same time you restrict him. Because if not, everyone will get confused. And what do I mean by confused? Is that the Cohanim themselves would think that the most important thing is to bring the sacrifices and to be at the temple and not to teach. And the Jewish people would think, I don't have anything to do with this Cohen. I see him only at the temple, so I guess the most important thing is just to bring a sacrifice. Who cares what I do in my daily life? Which is also a mistake. We create a mechanism, we create a structure which has, on one hand, elevation of a group. The purpose of the elevation of this group, the Cohanim, is to elevate all the people together. We expect the people to understand, embrace, respect this group, but to understand that this group is not a separate group. It's part of them. This is how you create a nation, the entire nation, that aspire for more holiness, for more spirituality. When you have this reciprocity between an elite group that is dedicated to Torah learning and to serving in the temple and to all the other people. It's not them and us. It's us. And I want to illustrate to you from a terrible story in the Babylonian Talmud in Tractate Yoma about how a Kohen, really 2 of them, did not understand their task. So the Talmud says to us, Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught us, מעשה בשני כהנים שהיו שניהם שווים, ורצין ועולין בכבש. So as you know, in the Mishkan there was the altar, and to the altar you had to go on stairs. So 2 Cohanim, they both wanted to bring the sacrifice. So each one of them, they start at the bottom of the stairs and they start running together. But they can't both sacrifice the animal, only one of them. קדם אחד מהם לתוך 4 אמות של חברו, נטל סכין ותקע לו בליבו. It's hard for me to even to translate. Mr. Cohen A and Mr. Cohen B are running in the stairs. Mr. Cohen A sees that Mr. Cohen B is going to what? Maybe to go first. What does he do? He takes a knife and he sticks it in his heart. So he drops on the floor and he can go and sacrifice the sacrifice. עמד רבי צדוק על מעלות העולם, so Rabbi Tzadok, who was witness to such a horrible incident, אמר אחינו בית ישראל שימו. הרי הוא אומר כי ימצא חלל באדמה ויצאו זקניך ושופטיך, אנו על מי להביא עגלה ערופה, על העיר, על העזרות, גאו כל העם בבכייה. So Rabbi Tzadok says, this is terrible. This is something that we should condemn. We know that when we find the dead body and we don't know who is the murderer, who murdered him, we bring this calf and we basically kill the calf in a river and we try to find the murderer. Here we have a murder in the temple. And for what? For a religious service. Think about it. A Kohen who was elevated for holiness, for spirituality. When he feels that what? That someone else is going to bring the sacrifice and not him, he is willing to murder his friend in the middle of the temple, thinking that he can go ahead and continue with his religious service? This is what we call a shanda in Yiddish, which means busha, which means embarrassment. It's even more than that. It's a disgrace. But the story does not end there. בא אביו של תינוק ומצאו שהוא מפרפר. The father of the Cohen that was murdered, meaning his father, אמר הרי הוא כפרתכם, ועדיין בני מפרפר ולא נטמעה סכין, ללמדך שקשה עליהם טהרת כלים יותר משפיכות דמים. This father, that I cannot explain exactly his behavior, he says, no, don't worry. Everything is good. My son is still alive, which means the knife in his heart is not impure. You can use the knife for the sacrifice. This story tells us a horrible reality. They were concerned more about purity and impurity of the knife rather than murder. This father says, don't worry about the murder. There was no murder yet. Yeah, he's going to die, my son, but it's okay. He's still alive. So take the knife. The knife is okay. You can sacrifice. You can sacrifice with the knife that you murdered someone. This story is probably one of the most extreme stories that try to describe what can be if you don't have checks and balances on this special group. When you have a little group and it's only you, yourself, your friends, your parents, your family, it's become like a family business. You become so obsessed with the details of this group, with its uniqueness, that you don't pay attention to anything else. Obviously, this story is very extreme, overly extreme, but it comes to highlight, to emphasize a point. If the Cohanim would not be connected to the people, if the Cohanim, if the priest will not be connected with society, it can lead to a murder at the temple itself. Now, I will need to digress for a second. And to say that when we talk about the priests in Judaism, we already saw it that until a time in history, it seems to be that the priests were doing their job to some extent. However, during the time of the Second Temple, they became corrupt. We have hints and stories in the Babylonian Talmud about it. And we also have testimonies from historians and other documents. And in a way, the Kohanim, especially during the Second Temple, towards, I would say, maybe middle to the end, became so corrupt and lost sight of their real job of being teachers, that our sages, after the destruction of the Second Temple, punished them. How can they punish them? Take a look at this Mishnah, very famous Mishnah in Ethics of the Fathers. Moshe קיבל תורה מסיני, Moshe received Torah from Sinai, ומסרה ליהושע, and he gave it to Yehoshua, to Joshua, ויהושע לזקנים, and Joshua gave it to the elders, וזקנים לנביאים, and the elders gave it to the prophets, ונביאים, and the prophets, מסרוה, gave it to the אנשי כנסת הגדולה, and they gave it to the people of the great assembly. And they said three things: you should be deliberate in judgment, have a lot of students, and make fences to the Torah. But let's focus on the first part of the Mishnah. Basically, this Mishnah delineates the link of tradition. Moshe received Torah at Sinai from God, gave it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, to the 70 elders. The elders gave it to the prophets gave it to the people of the Great Assembly. Who are those people of the Great Assembly? Probably started from Ezra the scribe, and ended somewhere with Shimon HaTzadik. Who is missing? Who is missing in this link? Someone that definitely is supposed to be there, the Cohanim. Where are the Cohanim in that link of tradition, in that link of teaching Torah? Answer, they were out. The sages, after the destruction of the second temple, they looked at the Cohanim and to some extent they blamed the Cohanim in the corruption that was during the second temple. And they said, you were so corrupt and you lost your priorities and you lost sight of your real task, and therefore you cannot be part of this link of wonderful, great people who made sure that we, the Jewish people, can survive. I mentioned last week the Jewish people survived 2,000 years without a temple, because it's not about the building, it's about the content. The sages are telling the Kohanim this week, this Parsha, if you don't know your job, if you don't know your position, if you don't know your task, if you don't understand your responsibility as teachers, you lost it. You're not going to influence and to put any impact on the Jewish people. So yes, today we get a blessing from the Kohanim, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's not like what it used to be. So because they did not act like teachers, they were excluded from this most prestigious list of people who made sure that the Jewish people will survive. And just to end with maybe a dream or an aspiration. The Torah states in Shmot, in the book of Exodus, in Perek Yutet, Ve'atem, who is Ve'atem? All of us. Tihiyu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. To be a Kohen has, in a way, two elements. There is a Kohen by birth. Your father was a Kohen, your grandfather was a Kohen, you become a Kohen. But there is also, you can become a Kohen by behavior, by fulfilling God's expectations. Because to be a Kohen means that I can be the angel of God, I can be connected spiritually to Hashem, and at the same time to be connected to the people, to the earth, to the land, to society, to the universe. It's to be this gesher, to be this bridge between earth and heaven. To be this person that has a debate on him if I'm the representative of the world and the universe or I'm God's representative. And the answer is, it's not mutually exclusive. It's something that we can do together. We can intertwine these two personalities. This is the purpose of a Kohen. To be a teacher, to inspire the next generation to do the same. When you teach someone, you help him or her to shape their minds, their personalities, their behavior, their decisions. You make sure that there is another generation. Ve'atem tiyu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. You all the people can become Kohanim. Not that we all going to serve in the temple and bring sacrifices, but in terms of how we behave, how we act, what we think, what are our priorities, we can definitely become a Kohen. So, the priests, the Kohanim in Judaism, definitely has a very, very important position. But the minute they lose sight from the essence of Kehuna, they lose it. Our dream, our aspiration is that we will all be Cohanim, that we will all be representatives of our society, of our universe, of the Jewish people, and God Himself as well. Thank you.